The New York State Department of Transportation presents the DOT POD.
And welcome into the DOT-POD. I'm Josh Heller.
And I'm Anya Cardos.
And we are delighted to have you joining us. Well, obviously, preparing for severe weather events is a massive part of DOT's work, as well as taking care of those weather events as they are happening and after they happen. And as climate change and unpredictable weather continue to impact our lives, NYSDOT is strengthening the way we plan for and respond.
That's right. Partnership is a huge element in these efforts, and NYSDOT could not have a better partner in tackling severe weather than Albany State Weather Risk Communication Center. It's a first of its kind collaboration between a university and state emergency managers, and it provides real-time data during changing and even life-threatening conditions. This place is basically a weather information clearinghouse on steroids.
And today we have the pleasure of recording this episode inside the center located in Albany. Today we'll talk more about where we are. But joining us is the creator and director of this program, Dr. Nick Bassill, a.k.a. Dr. Nick. Nick, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we also have NYSDOT's very own Director of Emergency Transportation Operations and Security Programs Bureau, Matt Vasilow. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me also.
So, Dr. Nick, we've heard that you are a rock star in the world of weather. Can you please tell us a little bit about your background, who you are, and what you're doing here at the center?
Yeah, this is the first time anyone's referred to me as a rock star on air. So.
But not the last.
But not the last.
My background is in meteorology. I got a PhD at the University of Wisconsin, which is where I'm from Wisconsin. And I just love looking through data. I love thinking about how weather affects people. I came to Albany about a decade ago when the New York State Mesonet was getting spun up. I started working there. And then the next challenge was, how do we apply this data to real world problems? And that's kind of where I took my current career arc.
Talk about, you mentioned the Mesonet, and it's been mentioned on the podcast previously. Joe Thompson mentioned it a couple times in the Snow and Ice spectacular that we had. But tell us, what is specifically the Mesonet, and what is the purpose of it?
So it was installed after Hurricane Irene and then following Hurricane Sandy. The funding came from the Sandy Supplemental Relief Bill. It's a network of really high quality weather stations spread pretty much evenly across New York. And the reason that it exists is that during those really big events like Irene or Sandy, where, say, the Catskills got inundated with flooding, those locations lacked really any kind of weather observation. So you didn't honestly know how much rain fell. And that was a problem. When we're thinking about how to plan for the future, respond to past events, or even request disaster money, you need some really basic facts. How much snow fell, how much rain fell, what was the peak wind speed? And we didn't have that to the way that we really needed it here in New York.
Let's get to Matt just real quick. Tell us a little bit about your background at DOT and how emergency management connects to this larger picture here with the Mesonet and the center.
Yeah, so I'm a civil engineer by trade. I spent the first 10 years of my career at DOT in designing roads in the highway design squad. Back in 2014, I took a spot up in operations, a little bit of a change of pace, and it really is just that, doing something different every day. You go to work thinking you're going to do A, you wind up doing Z. Weather is a big part of what we do at DOT for response. There's a lot of preparation and preparedness that go into making sure that we have the best response possible for New York State. And then to Dr. Nick's point, recovery and getting reimbursed for any kind of natural disaster such as Hurricane Irene.
So let's go to where we are really, which is the State Weather Risk Communications Center and how it got its start. And when I say got its start, I mean currently. I mean, it is still in its infancy. So, we talked about the Mesonet, but what is, the SWRCC, and, how did it come to pass? And again, what are its usages going to be?
The State Weather Risk Communications Center got its start because there was really a significant need in the state for additional weather information beyond what the Mesonet provides. So the Mesonet is fantastic, but it's a collection of weather stations that tell you what's happening now or what just happened. If you're going to plan for something, you want to know what's going to happen this weekend, not what happened yesterday, right? And so we need more than that can provide. And our organization, parts of the organizations that I'm a part of here at Albany, we began working with individual state agencies such as the DOT. So thank you for past DOT people for working with us, but as well as others, the Thruway, the MTA, Port Authority, Division of Homeland Security, others in the state. And it got to a point where we said, you know what, we're doing enough for the state here on kind of one-off short-term contracts. It doesn't really make sense for the state to operate like this. So we pushed for a dedicated permanent center that would allow us to kind of consolidate those projects and be able to hire people to provide dedicated weather support for anyone in the public sector of New York.
There's a lot of monitors, equipment, high-tech technology, innovative technology going on within this building. Talk about what we're looking at in this room and what you'll see if you got a tour of this incredible space.
So the variety of data that we have at our fingertips as a weather community has exploded recently. So we have the great Mesonet data that we already mentioned, comes in, we get a new data point every 5 minutes. So there's always up to the minute information. But there's also a wide variety of forecast data from the National Weather Service. We're great partners there, as well as other types of data that they produce and others produce. And then finally, there is what you might call ancillary data, non-weather data that is still very important for responding to the weather. So that might be, think sewer capacity or how many inches per hour the plows can clear in a given area, or those sorts of things. So we can try to bring those weather-related factors in and connect them up with the weather data to provide information that is more valuable to people in the state.
I as a layman, I totally understand the Mesonet. It makes a ton of sense, right? What's happening? I can see it. We can measure it. Obviously, with weather, it's fickle is the word I will use, especially up in the Northeast. I'm thinking back to the storm we had not too long ago. From the time we're recording this, I guess it would be a couple weeks now, where it potentially could have given us 6 to 12 inches, but then it went south and kept going south, and that happened very, very quickly. Over the course of about 24 hours, things changed dramatically. So it's one thing to be able to say, I see what's happening out there right now, but it's a very different thing to be able to say, okay, this is what we think is going to be happening there in 24, 48, 36 hours. How does, what we're doing here, does the data, how does it allow it to translate from this is what the data is saying to this is how this translates into real life?
That's a great question. And thank you for bringing up that very painful storm for me, because I'm a snow lover. And I was hoping we would actually get some snow in Albany from that storm. And not only did we not get snow, but we were probably 100 miles away from snow. But that's a good example of the fact that forecasts do change. You have to have kind of a thick skin if you're a weather forecaster, right? Because you're going to be wrong.
There are jokes.
An uncomfortable amount of time. But we often know the ways in which we could be wrong in advance. So we may know in that case, here's the forecast right now, but in real time we were communicating, here's the uncertainty with that. The peak uncertainty is on, say, the northern edge or the southern edge of this forecast snow. If things change, they're likely to change in A, B, and C ways. And so that is really what the center is about, is being able to communicate that uncertainty and going along with that, the relative worst case scenario. Because when decision makers are trying to plan for a storm, they want to know, how could I look foolish? Where could I have to send crews differently? Or is this going to be a worst case scenario for me where I need to totally plan for something that I wasn't prepared to plan for?
Matt, how does this work for emergency management in those terms for agencies like DOT and others when this kind of information is critical? And forethought is really paramount, because we need to send out crews, as Dr. Nick just said, to specific areas. How does this work, and what kind of information are you getting from Dr. Nick and his team? What does that look like for you?
So we start looking at the weather at least 72 hours prior to an event happening, and Dr. Nick and his team, as well as the National Weather Service, provide a lot of good information on the forecasts that are upcoming, potential drastic terms if something were to happen, for like the worst case scenario, best case scenario. And that allows us to plan, well, do we need to deploy staff and equipment? Are we anticipating needs from locals? Are there going to be any county EOCs open that we might need to support with regional staff? It affects our operations plans where we're moving people. So his forecast information is critical to making sure that we have the proper response. And sometimes it's like the last event, we were over prepared in a lot of cases, and it's better to over prepare than under prepare. We don't want to be chasing our tails and wishing we deployed an extra 10 or 12 operators because we didn't take into account the appropriate actions when he forecasted something.
And how do these updates work? You mentioned that sometimes you might be getting these at like midnight sometimes from Dr. Nick and his team. How does this work? Like, are these emails? Are these phone calls? What is that?
So we get a daily email briefing, usually between 10 and 12, 10 and noontime, 10 a.m. and noontime. And that gives us a 3-4 day outlook. Potential impacts leading from no impact up to severe impacts on different parts of the state. And then as we get closer to an event, Dr. Nick or somebody from his team will provide a update in the evening if something changes or progresses. Because as he mentioned earlier, that the model runs usually come out around 11 p.m. So if something is dire to our operational needs, he'll provide an additional forecast. And usually executive management and our team at DOT are looking at that, and we're able to make any kind of shifts in our plan based on the updated forecast.
So Governor Hochul announced this coordinated program. That was back in December. Has been talking about the center's role in a few press conferences. I was hoping you could both, could share some real world examples of how this is already helping New Yorkers and certainly how it will hopefully continue to evolve and help New Yorkers going forward.
For me, the biggest example that I can think of is the lead up to the Buffalo Bills game getting rescheduled, and the broader storm that encompassed that event. And so that was in early January. And so what we were doing for that is doing our normal weather briefing, like Matt just described, but also doing spot forecasts for the Buffalo Bills game in particular. So you may recall there was a lot of chatter, should we move it to Cleveland? Should we move it to Detroit? And we were kind of out there saying, you can't move it because the hazard is not sitting in a stadium watching a football game. The hazard is driving to and from. So if you move the game physically, what you were really doing is just having 70,000 people out on the roadways more, which is the exact opposite thing you want to do in a blizzard type scenario. So we were really getting that point across. And it was clearly it got across because it ended up being rescheduled. I think, I'm not going to sit here and say we were the sole reason it got rescheduled or anything like that, but I know we played at least a little tiny part in that. And I think what's remarkable about that event from a weather forecasting perspective is it was rescheduled before any snow had fallen during the event, which definitely there was no way that would have happened, 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago.
Yeah. So this has like real impractical terms for people who just want to get to a game. And you're saying, look, this could have a ripple effect in ways that maybe some people haven't thought of. That provides like a real world opportunity for emergency managers like Matt. What kind of tweaking did you do during that storm? Did DOT do?
So we sent additional resources out to Buffalo and our Region 4 offices to help accommodate the additional snowfall intensity, the higher rates. We had our DOT Region 5 rock open, the Region 4 rock was open. We had additional resources to help keep up with the snowfall intensity that was, I believe, at times like 3 inches an hour, 4 inches an hour, which to Dr. Nick's point, if we have 70,000 people on there for that Bills game, that's a nightmare. We're reliving a couple years ago all over again with stranded motorists. So the heat of rescheduling the game and the travel bans, which Dr. Nick referenced, the information he provides us gives us a time where blizzard conditions are going to be from A to B. So we're able to work with the Motor Carriers Association, put in truck restrictions, travel restrictions, maybe in certain cases like Buffalo, full travel bans in certain areas, and fully closing roadways to eliminate the chance for motorists to get stranded and allow the plow truck drivers to keep the roads in a good condition.
Yeah, important. And quick acronym check. ROC stands for?
Oh, I'm sorry, Regional Operations Center.
Oh, there it is.
Perfect.
Acronym alert. She's for our listeners and also for us. We were talking about preparedness, obviously, and there's a room where all agencies and state leaders meet and coordinate during a statewide response to weather events. Tell us about the State Emergency Operations Center, or the bunker, as it is currently known.
Oh, I like to also refer to it as the happiest place on earth outside of Disneyland. So
no windows? Is that?
No. So it is actually a legit bunker. No windows. It's underground.
Wow.
So it is a place. They normal day-to-day operations. They monitor conditions across the state, not only at a transportation perspective, but any kind of physical threat, cyber threat. They're kind of doing their due diligence. They're helping plan for radiological exercises and evaluation, keeping a tab on everything statewide. And then when we get weather, like we had in Buffalo, they activate one of the emergency support functions or several of the emergency support functions. There's 15 in New York State, and DOT is the lead agency for ESF1, which deals with transportation, keeping the roadways open from white line to white line. And we're also supporting members of ESF3, which is engineering and public works. So bridge assessment, bridge inspection. And ESF7 is logistics. We're a member of logistics, and OEM oversees the logistics function, but we're obviously a big player with that, with all the fleet we have.
In my head, just so you know where I'm at, I'm picturing Dr. Strangelove and the big circular table with the lights down and no windows. So I don't know if it looks like that, probably not. But in my head it is, and I'm fine with it. I'm gonna let that.
There's one room that looks a little like that.
Really?
Yeah, not too far off.
Yeah, I'm picturing a Cold War bunker.
Yeah, very nefarious. Very nefarious.
No cowboy hats from what I've seen.
Yet.
Let's talk about some of the projects that you are coordinating on, Dr. Nick, with DOT right now. And one of them that seems very interesting is the use of our traffic cameras and enhancing that with AI. Can you guys talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. So obviously AI, machine learning, that's the hot topic right now in terms of, well, pretty much everything, I guess. But the idea is that we have this wealth of camera data so the cameras, for those who don't know, they point looking at a roadway, and then you can use those to determine what the road surface condition is. If it's really snowy, you might classify it as severe snow. So if you're going to that 511 New York site and you look at all the pretty colors on there, you can see what the roads are like for a given storm. But that needs to be done manually, either by someone sitting in a chair like myself looking at cameras, or a truck driver, a plow driver calling in. And so the idea is, hey, can we do this automatically? Can we just give this task to AI and say, hey, classify these automatically for us? And that's what we're doing right now. And we've demonstrated actually quite a lot of success. It's about a 80% success rate at classifying it according to the various categories and the DOT, severe snow, wet, dry, etc. So we're hopeful that we can develop a tool then to allow that data to be automatically updated on the 511 site, so that maybe it can save some time from DOT folks.
And so this could be used by DOT to determine where do we need to send our trucks out during like an ice and snow event, but can it also translate to regular folks, the traveling public who are out there as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The 511 site is open to the public, and I think
And the W2A beats that Nick's referring to, those are updated every 4 hours at a minimum by the residencies. Like he said, they're color coded depending on the severity of the conditions. That will reflect on the color coding of the roadway.
Where we are, right, being here on UAlbany's campus, having access to not only all this technology, but all these resources, but also having access to, to interns, to students who are looking to get into this as well. How important is this, being here with, young men and women who ultimately are going to be in these positions that you guys are in or moving forward? How important is that collaboration, and what has been the benefit of that collaboration here with the university itself?
I really couldn't imagine a better location for this than here in this specific building, in the ETEC building, because in our building, we have two other departments. We have a College of Emergency Preparedness, Homeland Security, and Cybersecurity. There are other organizations here that are not teaching institutions, but have generate data like the Mesonet, or have computing like the Excite Lab and other types of things. So we're really the perfect spot, because when we're trying to hire people, or if we're trying to train the next generation of people who want to get jobs, whether it's the DOT or in meteorology or Homeland Security somewhere, those people are here, and they are looking for ways to kind of hone their skills. And so we have a ready-made spot for them to just hop in. So for this semester, it's our first semester where the State Weather Center has interns. We have 7 of them. 5 of them are meteorology majors. 1 of them is an education major. And then 1 of them is a emergency management major. So we have a wide variety there. And this is no joke. I was walking through our lobby earlier today and overheard a student I do not know, a student talking about how they were working on a project with the DOT, how they were trying to study like different types of salt for different applications. So that's the kind of thing. I don't know this person, but just as an example of the wealth of things that happen here in ETEC, clearly we're in the right spot.
Yeah, it enriches their education, and it opens up so many different doors, because you think education, that's something that I would not expect.
Right. Yeah. And, obviously the benefit too of being here is that we're right next to the DOT headquarters. We're right next to the emergency management headquarters. We're right down the street from DEC. So we can work with all of you very closely and, figure out what needs to be done.
What about moving forward? How do you see this program growing with state agencies? And am I right? This is the first of its kind across the country, correct?
That's right. So the closest equivalent is there are a few states that have 1 or 2 people like this, either like a state meteorologist or maybe a couple people who specialize in one topic. So like hurricanes in Florida, wildfires in California, that sort of thing. But there's no other organization or state that I know of like this, where the state is funding a larger organization that's dedicated to a wide range of weather and other types of impacts at a state university. And the benefit, to being at a state university is all of the factors we just mentioned. But here at UAlbany, we're so close to everyone. And where we expect to go is, right now we're just getting spun up. So we literally have 3 full-time people on staff, including myself. And we're hiring another 3 meteorologist types right now. Then we'll hire a software engineer, a weather programmer, a social scientist after that. And then from there, we'll really start engaging everyone in the state and saying, okay, here's what we're doing now, but let's not think what we could do next month. Like, let's think what we could do in 5 years, 3 years, 10 years. Let's start thinking about the really big wish list items and working towards those, while also just sort of fine tuning our day-to-day forecasting and communication strategies.
Can you say what some of those might be?
Yeah,
just,
I'm curious.
Because that's the thing. I at least for myself and Anya, I'm sure the same. We don't know what we don't know. So
exactly.
What is 5 years, 10 years down the line? What does that potentially hold that you guys could be working on?
Yeah, I'll give two sort of, one short range one and one long range one. So a short range one might be just a map that tells you in an upcoming weather event, will the precipitation start as rain or snow? For pre-treatment purposes, right? You won't salt if you know it's going to be half an inch of rain and then it goes to snow afterward. And that is something that meteorologists could do very easily right now, and it's not done. And it's sort of wild to me that it's not done. And that's sort of one of the things that I'm like, okay, once we hire someone who can do that, that's month 1. But when you think of really kind of bigger long-term projects, maybe you could take knowledge of the what material the roads are made out of, and understanding how they respond to sunshine or temperature. Do they warm up faster, cool down faster, and create a map of places where the snow is most likely to not stick versus stick. Again, I'm just spitballing here because we haven't had these conversations. But we talked about the camera project earlier. Can you create a better version of that with maybe crowdsourcing cameras from all over the state, because we only have the 511 cameras in certain high density or high traffic areas. There's a wealth of other kind of non-DOT, non-roadway type things we can do as well. And I'm just honestly, from a scientific perspective, I'm excited to learn what those things are, because we don't know them yet.
I think we're all excited to find out what those are too, and see them ultimately come to fruition.
Matt, just listening to Nick talk about all of these forward-thinking projects, How excited are you to be a part of some of this?
Well, he's got a lot of cutting edge things that are going to be both short term and long term, and it's going to only improve our response. The more information we have for the intermediate forecast and the long term forecast, whether we're pre-treating roads with brine, salting, increasing our truck pattern in certain areas to make sure we maintain the appropriate level of service. The pavement temperatures, that's very interesting because then if we know if we do have some weather monitoring stations along Island that monitor the pavement temperature. So if pavement temperature goes below freezing, then we know we got to worry about roads freezing. So the more information we have on hand lets us make better operational decisions, not only in the long term, but in the immediate future too.
Right. Arming us with great real-time information during critical events.
Yeah, it's only the more information we have, the better our response will be. And like I said, we'd rather be over-prepared and have something shift the last 24 to 12 hours out and be less severe than going the other way. So the more confidence these guys have in their forecasts and the more tools they have to give us that confidence at DOT, the better it's going to be.
Well, Dr. Nick, Matt, thank you so much for sharing your insight today and on what is going to be in the future for us very soon. I can't wait to see how these projects turn out and what we're going to be talking about in 6 months to a year from now and maybe 10, 20 years from now. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
And assuming we're still around here, then we'll have to do a little 5-year update.
Yeah, I'd love to do a little retrospective.
Absolutely. As we look back, and also I do want to thank the University of Albany for having us here and letting us do this podcast on site and welcoming us with open arms here. Certainly appreciated. Always like to get on the road. Again, thank you both, and thank you to everyone listening in to today's episode. We'll be back in a couple weeks, as we always are. You can reach out to us as you normally do. Podcast at dot.ny.gov is the quickest way to get out. But thanks so much for tuning in. We always love to see your comments, see your ratings, and likes and subscriptions. So we appreciate that. So Anya, it's a fun one.
Ooh, this is a fun one. And you're right. I love getting on the road and taking a road trip. It's fun. And to see what this place looks like in here, it's amazing. And a lot of young people here as well. You can tell they're excited about what's going on here.
Yeah, future's bright. So that's it for us here. So for Anya, I'm Josh. Until next time, see you right here on the DOT POD.